Old Moon Quarterly is a magazine of weird sword and sorcery fantasy, in the tradition of Clark Ashton Smith, Tanith Lee, and Carl Edward Wagner. It contains stories of strange vistas, eldritch beings, and the bloody dispute thereof by swordsmen and swordswomen both. Hello and welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Hembar, and today I'll be doing a review of Old Moon Quarterly Issue 3. Old Moon Quarterly Issue 3 is their winter 2023 issue of the magazine. It is the third one, obviously. I have read the first two, though I have not reviewed them, as I don't often review magazines and even anthologies on this channel, but I have reviewed some others before. If you caught my Whetstone Issue 1 review and my New Edge Sword and Sorcery magazine Issue 0 review. Anyways, this starts with an introduction from the editors that mentions Perlevos. I imagine that's how you would say that, maybe, in Old French. It's a less popular but weird remix of Arthuriana from the 13th century. Of course, this comparison to weird Arthuriana from the Age of Chivalry is cool, and it sets the tone of the issue and magazine as a whole. The back of the book also ties Old Moon into the tradition of Clark Ashton Smith, Tanith Lee, and Carl Edward Wagner, which is a pretty cool tradition to be a part of. Like, this is the cool side of fantasy, guys. At least for me, it is. Now, story 1, and there are 4 stories here, but 5 things to look at least. We have Evil Honey by James Inga. I actually should have looked up how to pronounce that beforehand. But anyways, it is a Morlock Ambrosius story. He is a staple of contemporary sword and sorcery, though somehow I haven't read any tales either by the author or of Morlock before this. I don't know how that happened, but he wields the sword Tyrfing, which is awesome, right? Because this is a world that is somewhat similar and not, right, to ours. But Morlock must face evil bees which have bothered him by drinking all the mead. So it has a very good sense of humor. It's cheeky and dark. There is a quest involving a god and B-sides action, and it's an ironic dystopia I was really not expecting, but I really enjoyed it. Honestly, I should get to more Morlock stories. Story 2 is one by T.R. Siebert, titled Knife Lace Prayer. It is a story of the world ending, and it gave me good mixes of Ragnarok and Armageddon, and it is appropriately nice and grim for such a topic. It is quite a gripping start, which I'll shorten here, so this is in quotes. As she pursues her god across the ashlands, the girl who used to be a beast carries only 3 things with her. First, a knife. Second, a piece of lace. And third, a prayer. End quote. While the first story is set in a very small area, the second is epic, which showcases that sword and sorcery can be epic, and if done in a focused and rather personal manner, it works really well. Still, the genre is generally not epic, so I think many would call this one more of a dark fantasy, but, you know, labels, who cares? Anyways, so then the third story is Singing the Long Retreat, that is at number 3, of course, and this, well, if you are like me, it will immediately remind you of Tolkien's Fighting the Long Defeat. This story is by R.K. Duncan, and it is, well, it's kind of actually about fighting the Long Defeat as well, actually. Fatima, if I remember correctly, is part of a force fighting the inexorable horde of the Herak, this time at Beir al Tehan, along with elephants, rhinoceros, and, well, other things, and, you know, like fighting on horseback, for example, which we don't actually see here. It has very much a not European feel. A comparison to a roc, not entirely sure how to say it, a legendary bird for those unaware, ties this together nicely. It's rather heroic, and it's kind of about dying for your cause, in a way. I like it when you know a character is doomed to a degree. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it is a big gripe of mine when you know plot armor protects characters. That feeling is explicitly stripped here, and it seems almost ritualistic. This is also because there is singing, a special sort, as it's kind of a hymn. And you actually get the poetry, and it's pretty cool. I always like poetry in my stories. Honestly, don't get enough of it in fantasy in general, and I don't get enough of it in short stories or in sword and sorcery short stories. Made me think about what defeat really is, and is it really the same as retreat? But anyways, this one feels a little bit at times more ethereal and abstract rather than like concrete. Not exactly a bad thing. Definitely has a different feel, I felt, though, than all the other stories. And then the last story is The Feast of St. Otmore. This is by Graham Thomas Wilcox, and it really rounds out the issue. Wilcox is actually one of the editors, and the only one I had read before, which was a story that gave me vibes similar to Christopher Buehlman's Between Two Fires. It's kind of the same here, actually. And this is the better story, actually, too. But it starts with an epigraph from Bertrand de Born, a troubadour. It's from his Cervantes, 26, I think. There's great meter and rhyme. Of course, that's not original to Wilcox, but anyways, it's really great to start out the story that way. And the story starts itself with thus: one St. Otmar's Eve, a nun bade me murder a man. It is a tale bloody and brief. So it is set in autumn after returning from the Northern Crusades. It's obviously in first person. Hieronymus seems to be the name of the persona. The story takes up about half the volume. It's much longer than the other stories. It's wonderfully macabre and archaic in setting I'm a fan of. It's properly romantic. There's a great hook and plot structure, and I think Wilcox pushed himself to potentially being a favorite sword and sorcery contemporary writer, along with people like Chase Fulmar, Jason Carney, Scott Oden, David C. Smith. There's good imagery all around in these stories. There's a great cover image, honestly, though I think issue 1's cover image is still my favorite. And I think I noticed one spelling error in the volume, and the phrase Daemon of the Spirit tripped me up because it seems redundant, but I think that's probably just my antiquated eyes, because I realize that makes sense in most contexts. Anyways, so beyond the stories, there is a review in the back. Wilcox, the author of The Last, gives us details of final cuts, new tales of Hollywood horror, and other spectacles, edited by Ellen Datlow. It is a horror anthology published in 2020, and I was previously unaware of it, and though I personally don't read much advertised as strictly as horror, Wilcox is convincing in his review, and I think I might have to grab a copy to enjoy the stories myself. Of the magazines out there that have, more than one issue, this is the only one I've read all the issues. It's consistent for weird and dark, in Sword and Sorcery, and it's new and exciting. Sometimes I feel Sword and Sorcery can get too tied down in the points of the genre and be, kind of copy and paste. But this is really refreshing, and I think it's bound to bring me a favorite story in time. And as of right now, it's definitely bringing the entertainment I want from short stories. So I really enjoyed this one. They're relatively cheap, guys. These are really cheap. Just go look on Amazon. But anyways, this has been Liam Williams Lyceum. I'll catch you next time.